So when I was 20 and Shauna was 22, that was when we got married. This is us on our honeymoon in Lake Tahoe. We found like one of those old timey places, and sure, why not? And plus, I got to hold a fake gun. So it was a great time in Lake Tahoe, and in many ways, we had a fairy tale beginning. We fell in love fast and hard, and 15 months almost to the day was when we got married. And after an amazing honeymoon, we had a fun road trip across the country over the 4th of July week. We moved from San Diego to a small house on Grand Lake in Oklahoma. My classes to prepare for ministry didn't start up until around mid August. So we had an amazing few weeks, just the two of us, to be able to settle into our new home, our new environment. And it was exciting and fun and romantic. And my grandparents, they actually lived across the street in a house on this resort that they owned, this fisherman's resort. And it was this beautiful, slow paced lake community. And in many ways, it was like a dream come true as we entered into the first few months of our marriage. But then one early evening in the fall of that first year, I remember after a really intense argument, once again over who knows what, I remember going into the bathroom, closing the door, filling the tub with as hot of water as I could handle, lighting a candle, turning off the light, and then just sitting in that hot tub, quietly saying to myself, I have made a horrible mistake. Now, why? Why did that happen? In fact, why does a moment similar to that happen in the vast majority of individuals who get married? A moment, a moment where to the core of their soul, they're thinking, I have made a mistake. I shouldn't have gotten married, or more specifically, I should not have married this person. And today I'm going to try to answer that question in a very, very practical way. Today is the final part of this series. If you've missed any part of this, any of the messages, please get on to newlifewichita.com. You can click to watch, you can click to listen to the podcast. But with all of the past 5 weeks as context, we're bringing this home with the context that actually a few years ago I've talked about before. And some of you were here. And if you were here, now you've got a few more years behind you. So some of it may come from a different or more clear perspective. But I hope you'll pay very close attention because this is going to shed a lot of experience, shed a lot of light on many of your experiences growing up in the family that you grew up in, what you saw with your parents, and what you've experienced with yourself. Because as it relates to what we saw with our parents growing up, and we experienced, and as it relates to a future relationship, or when we first move into or towards a long-term romantic relationship or into marriage, the reality is that all of us bring into a relationship a box of hopes, dreams, and desires. That is when we move towards a marriage and a long-term relationship and a marriage. We come into it with all these different things. Like for example, we all have an idea of we're going to have one income, we're going to have two incomes, we're going to have two incomes and live off both, or two incomes and I'm going to save yours, we're going to save yours, and we'll live off the rest. We need a lot of money, we need a little money, we'll just live off of love. I don't know. Then all of us come in with hopes, dreams, and desires as far as how clean the house is going to be, how cluttered or not cluttered it's going to be, and what's clutter and what's cleanliness, or whatever it is. We all have an idea of what kind of home we're going to live in. We'll start out in an apartment, or we're going to rent, or we're going to try to buy as quickly as possible, or we're going to buy ahead of time beforehand. And then we all come into a relationship thinking, well, this is how we handle time, and this is what we'll do with our discretionary time, and we're only going to work this many hours a week between the two of us or one of us. And then when it comes to what we do on the weekends and in time that we can do whatever we want, here's what it's going to look like and the rhythm of the things. And then we all come into a relationship with hopes, dreams, and desires of how we are going to resolve conflict with one another. There's going to be differences. And, for the one, is like we just talk and we work things through and we don't go to sleep until it's done. And the other's like, no, we get a good night's sleep. We'll talk about it in the morning. And one's like, I came from a very loud family and we get loud and energetic, but in the end, everything's okay. And the other's like, no, 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 I don't like loud. I want things to be quiet. And that's how we show respect and process things together. And then we come into a relationship and usually it's the guy, like I'm going to have a two-seat sport car for the whole time, and usually it's a wife. Like we need something a little more practical, and so we do that. And then we all have hopes, dreams, and desires. We come into a romantic, long-term marriage relationship, and men, I will say, typically have an idea of what their wife will not wear to bed, and like, honey, no, and she's just like, all he cares about is that I'm comfortable, and that's all that matters. And then what else do we have here? Oh yeah. Then we all would envision as far as children and how many children we're going to have. Like, I grew up in a family of like 6 or 7, or I just really don't like kids. I don't want kids. And it's like, okay, well, we want one. Like, no, I don't want one. I want a basketball team. And if we have 2 girls, we got to keep going until we have a boy. And then again, going back to the conflict resolution, guys like conflict resolution. I thought that's what sex was for. Like, so oh, and then there's vacations and travel. Like, oh, when vacations, what they look like is, we just go see family that's nearby, or we travel in the States, or no, 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 I want to see the world, and I want to travel the globe, and all these things. And so all of us come in with all of these hopes, dreams, and desires. We've just got this box. We can't help it. And there's one big thing that I don't really know how to illustrate, and that is that all of us come in with hopes, dreams, and desires about how we'll be treated in the relationship. That, if she loves me, well, then she'll do this, or she'll never do that. Or if he loves me, well, he'll do this, or he'll never do that. And there are several things that impact what's in our hopes and dreams box that we just have, that we carry. And one of the biggest things that impacts what we've seen and what we've heard and what we've experienced, specifically in the home situation that we grew up in. And this is a big, huge, complex, emotional deal. Most of our hopes, dreams, and desires are a response to what we grew up in and what we grew up around. And we either are going to try and avoid something, or we're going to try and recreate something. To avoid is, I'm determined that my relationship is not going to be like this, or I saw how my dad was, or I saw how my mom was. I'm not going to be like my dad. I'm not going to be like my mom. Or you grew up in a situation like, well, this is exactly what I want, because this is wonderful. Or maybe it wasn't your parents, maybe it was an older brother, an older sister. For me, it was my grandparents. Looked at them and thought, this is what I want, the kind of relationship I want to have. But even in those situations, even when there's something great that you should want to recreate, it's worthy of recreating. The thing is, in the middle of all that is me. These are my hopes, my dreams, my desires. And at some point in the relationship, while you're dating, or at the altar, or a month or a year after you're married, or at some point along the way, here's what we essentially do. We essentially take our hopes, dreams, and desires box, and we hold it out to the person that we marry and go, here, make them happen. When I asked you out, when I pursued you, when I decided to say yes or decided to propose, well, this is what I imagine the relationship would be like. So here, make it happen. And the problem is, when we hand our box to somebody, to them, to us, it feels like hopes, dreams, and desires, but to them, it feels like expectations. To them, it feels like a weight. To them, it feels like a homework assignment that needs to be completed. It's an expectation that needs to be met. It's a responsibility. And if I don't come through for you, well, then you're going to be disappointed in me. Expectations are simply the strong belief that something will happen or will be the case in the future. That's what an expectation is. Like, babe, I know, I know it probably won't happen in the first month or the first year, but when? Like it's been a while. Are we getting closer? Are we going to make that big trip, or big when? When? And when are we going to make this reality? What we end up doing is we transform our hopes, dreams, and desires into expectations. This happens even in the most ideal relationship, because essentially what we end up doing is we end up exchanging boxes. We go, here's my box, make it happen. And they're like, okay, well, here's my box, make it happen. And we just basically exchange boxes. And again, this is just what happens. And ultimately, there becomes a collision of needs, of what I want, what I expect. And then when needs go unmet, I illustrated this 3 weeks ago with Mr. and Mrs. Mugg, we end up colliding. And when we collide, beads come out. Actions, reactions, emotions come out of us that we don't like: anger, frustration, jealousy, dissatisfaction, unkind, hurtful words. But as we showed 3 weeks ago, they come out of us because they were already in us to begin with. But suddenly, what we do is we say, I'm going to give you mine, you're going to give me yours. We swap boxes, and then what is intangible and ethereal, and I've always envisioned and I've always dreamed that it could be this way, suddenly it becomes a burden to someone as they hand you their burden as well. You and I collide, and when two eyes collide, we do one of five things. The first one is we just leave. And this is what a lot of individuals or couples just opt for. Like, okay, you know what? This is not what I had in mind. This is not, like, I didn't know, or you didn't tell me, or you weren't honest, or you didn't make it clear enough, or you changed. I thought you weren't going to change, or I thought you would change, and you didn't change. This is not what I signed up for, or I'll never live up to what you want me to live up to. And I don't want to live with that kind of pressure, or clearly you're never going to change. So my expectations are never going to be met. So I'm out. But see, here's the thing. What happens when you leave? Well, then you basically just take your box and then you move into another relationship and you hand it to someone else because you're like, I think you'll do it better. So we just hand it off to them. Now, the second thing is, if we don't leave, is we win. In every relationship, there's generally a stronger personality. And in those situations, oftentimes, the person with the stronger personality will power up and they'll win by leveraging the 4 C's. So here's the key. If you want to have a terrible relationship, here's how you do it. You convince, convict, control, or coerce. You convince, like, look, I realize this is how you think it should be, but that's not how it's going to be. I know this is how you always dealt with conflict in your family, but let me tell you how it's going to be in our family. Or I know you've always dreamed this, but see, honey, you just have the wrong box. You need to see what's in my box. Because if you'll just do things my way, become more like me, well, then you'll be happier. And I know that's true because I'm happier when things go my way. Because we always become happier when we abandon who we are and who God created us to be in order to conform to the image of our partner, right? And see, you win because you make them feel inadequate, guilty, or stupid. It's like, okay, I don't want to be critical, but you're just kind of doing it wrong. Why can't you do it right? Or if your approach isn't, it's just not really that it's inadequate, it's kind of dumb. Or I don't want to judge you and your family, but I mean, they're kind of a wreck, they're kind of a mess. And so, and honestly, I don't like your way. So no, we're not going to try it your way. We convict, convince, coerce, nag, bribe, threaten until we get our way. And then at the end of the day, the winner is happy. In fact, for them in general, life is pretty good because they've got somebody that's going to help them live out their dream and how things should go. And they can't quite figure out what's wrong with him or her, but they're coming along. So we leave or we win. The third response to two eyes colliding is we conform. I've seen this so many times. We just roll over because to become somebody that we're not, to compensate for somebody who won't love or accept us for who we are otherwise. We abandon who we are in order to do whatever we can to make another person happy and to keep them happy regardless of how miserable it makes us. And conforming works for a while. Just last week, I was talking with a guy. He's a Christian guy married to a Christian woman. And we got to talking about Mother's Day and wives, and we were talking about that. And he shared with me. He said, "Yeah, when it comes to my wife and special days like Mother's Day and her birthday, Valentine's Day, or anniversary, my whole goal essentially is that by the end of the day, she's just not mad. Because if I don't do the special day just right or guess right, whatever she's hoping for that particular day for that particular year, she just gets mad. And either she'll yell or she'll just completely withdraw for days. But if he gets it right, then it's a great day. Because when it comes to conforming, it really works for the person who won. But it works for the person who conformed as well because the level of tension goes down a little bit in the relationship, at least for a day. And in the end, it's not my hope, my dream, or what I wish or desire, expect, but at least the tension is lower. The fighting, the debating, the guilt is quieted. If she's happy, I'll just deal with it. If he's happy, I'll just deal with it. I'll just take it because at least there's peace. But when someone in a relationship just simply gives up who they are to become someone they're not, at the end of the day, the bitter irony is they both lose respect for one another. The partner loses respect for them, they lose respect for their partner, they both lose. So when eyes collide, we leave, we win, we conform, or fourth, we respond in a way that actually is most common. We compromise. In fact, for many people, they kind of think this is the relationship goal. Like this is winning at marriage or a relationship. You just compromise. And perhaps you saw this with your parents. But the problem is in a compromised marriage is what you're doing is you're keeping score. Like we did it your way last time, so this time we're going to do it my way. Or and this can happen in a dating, engaged, marriage relationship. It's like, well, we can't do it, that way this time because that was your time way last time. This is my time. And what happens in this relationship is there's low trust because there's tension. There's tension because things have to remain balanced and fair. Like, why would I do this for you when you didn't do for me the last time? You you're getting more, I'm getting less. That's not fair. And then the trust just gets lower and lower and lower. And then when there's low trust, there's low intimacy. Well, why? Well, because you cannot be intimate and give yourself fully to someone you don't trust. In fact, if you want to know the secret to great sex and marriage, it isn't about the physical. It has everything to do with the intimacy. And intimacy is tied to trust. And in a relationship where we leave or win or conform or compromise, there may still be sex, but it's just physical. And it's not amazing because there's no real intimacy. It's ultimately unfulfilling. So to recap, when eyes collide, we leave or we win or we conform or perhaps we compromise, but in all four options, we lose it. Now there's a fifth option, and it's so powerful. And it's so amazing. It's what I've spent the last 5 weeks trying to articulate. It's summed up perfectly in the Apostle Paul's words when he wrote to a group just like us to do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit, but rather in humility value others above yourselves, not looking to your own interests, but each of you to the interests of others. And this is one of the best visuals that I've seen or can come up with. Because here's what happens when we operate from a posture or position of expectations in any love relationship. And that is that expectations create a debt-debtor relationship. In other words, when I put all of my hopes, dreams, and desires on you, or you put it on someone, what you are basically communicating is that you're living under the assumption of you owe me. You owe me. I've committed my life to you. You've committed your life to me. Therefore, you owe me this. You owe me this level of attention, I expect. You owe me to resolve conflict in this way. You owe me to make sure that I enjoy how we do our calendar, our money, our travel, our time, our affection. You owe me to make sure the house is clean to my level of however I feel the house is clean. You owe it to me to stay fit or stay in shape. You owe me patience. You owe me kids. You owe me clean socks. You owe me what a man's supposed to do. Like, this is what my father did, or that's what a woman's supposed to do. That's what my mom did, or my mom or dad didn't do this, but this is what a man or a woman or a husband or wife should do, is supposed to do. But here's the thing. How much gratitude do you express to people who pay you what they owe you? How much gratitude do you express to people who provide a service that they were supposed to and expected to provide? In the many, many years that I have faithful, like I'm the bill payer in our family. I just do it. Um, Shauna's much better with numbers, but I just pay the bills. In the entire time that I've been faithfully paying our utility bills, never once have I received a perfumed laden letter sealed with a kiss. Dear Chad, we want to express how thankful we are that you have once again made your payment on time. We have come to cherish the notification every month that we have received your very kind and thoughtful payment and in advance before its due date. Thank you. Never happened. But do you know what will get me very individualized, personal attention from Kansas Gas, Evergy Electric, or the city of Wichita? If I'm late on a payment, if I don't meet the expectation of what's expected of me, that's when I get personal attention. And for some of you, and I don't know, maybe none of you, but for some it could be an uncomfortable, painful glimpse into your relationship. But the only time you get personal attention is when you fail to meet an expectation. It could be that maybe some of you are sitting next to someone that's desperately hoping, listening, because the truth is that even though you may not feel this way, they feel like the only time they get special attention from you is when they don't meet your expectation. And you may be good at making them aware of it. The amount of gratitude that one receives in a relationship where you feel they owe you or they feel you owe them is minimal. Why? Because we rarely express gratitude for things that we've come to expect. Now, in every relationship or marriage, like over time, you get into a routine. In some ways, you have to get into a routine, and it's fine. In every relationship, there are certain responsibilities and roles that need to be fulfilled, and that will naturally get fulfilled by each person in the relationship. That's okay. That's a good thing. But here's the thing: when you come to expect the person to do what they've always done, well, the gratitude is going to be minimal because, like, I'm not going to they're going to say thank you when they do what they're supposed to do. Expectation is not going to say, wow, thank you for doing that thing that you do every single day or whatever the routine is. But gratitude will say, wow, thank you for doing that, which says, I didn't expect that of you. I'm grateful for you. I see what you're doing. And that will supercharge and fuel a healthy, lasting, in love relationship because gratitude communicates, I see what you're doing and I appreciate it, all of it. I don't expect it. I value all the big and the little things that you do. I'm grateful. Like Shauna has just gotten so good at this. Like I'm our lawn guy. I just am. I didn't know I was signing up for that, but I was happy to sign up for that. I keep the lawn mowed and fertilized and weed free and bug free and leaf free because I'm OCD and it's just what I do. But still, Shauna will tell me regularly, wow, babe, the lawn looks so good. Shauna is most often the one to put all of our clean laundry away in the hangers and on the hangers and the closet and our dresser drawers. And nearly every time, you can fact check me because she's here, I will tell her, thank you. Thank you for doing our laundry. Thanks for doing my laundry. Thank you that I have clean underwear in my drawer. Because the other thing that the whole debt-debtor relationship thing, what it will do is it eliminates the possibility of unconditional love because you owe me eliminates you love me. See, if I owe Shauna flowers, like for Valentine's Day, like where are my flowers? Well, here they are. Okay, I'm at the bar. We're even. We're back to zero. Or if it's Christmas, it's like it's Christmas. I'm a gift guy. Where's my gift, Shauna? Like here's the gift. Okay, well she met my expectations. You know, why would I express gratitude? This is why a box full of expectations undermines intimacy because this feels like pressure every single day of the week. That if I even if I meet your expectations, well, I just reached the bar. I'm just at zero. We're at even. And what that means is I can never ever do enough to make you feel that I love you. Even if I meet the bar in whatever category. Because then there's going to be another category where I'm not hitting that bar. And you know what? That's an exhausting way to live. There's just no way to live. Because there's going to always be something more where there's an expectation that is not being met. So the big question is, well, what do we do then? What do we do with our expectations, the stuff that's in our box? Like, do we just pretend that it's not there or pretend that it doesn't matter? It's not that big of a deal. Like, do we ignore them? Do we deny them? Do we pretend or hide? No. Because the fact is, like all of these things are actually all good things. They're all natural things. The, the key is to take them and transfer them into something that is just purely desires. Like what I have expected here, what I expect on conflict here, what I expect on transportation and vehicles, and child, two children, finances, time, cleanliness, orderliness, all that, that we just put that and keep that in the desires box. Because this makes all the difference. You go, well, okay, how do I do that? Like let's just be real. Like how do I do that? Because I feel like in a marriage there are things the other is supposed to do. Well, the best way to do it is just to answer this question. What does my mate owe me? Because here's what couples who have been married 20, 30, 40 years who are still in love will tell you. The answer to that question, what does my husband or what does my wife owe me, is nothing. Couples who go the distance know that they owe each other everything, but they don't expect anything in return, which doesn't make any sense. But it's because it comes from Jesus and not culture. Because culture will say, no, 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 they owe you, they owe you, they owe you. But let me tell you about the happiest couples that I know, that you know, there's something about them that doesn't make any sense anyways. And part of it is that they live every day under the assumption that they owe their partner everything, but they don't expect them something in return. They don't expect anything in return. They do that for each other. It is simply the application of what we've learned earlier in this series from the Apostle Paul when writing to those who were married or who would marry, that in our marriages, for those of us who claim to be a Christian, that we should submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. That the biggest conflict in our marriage should be who's first and who's second. And I'm going to Shauna like, no, 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 you're first. She's like, no, 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 you're first. I'm like, no, no, your hopes, dreams, and desires first, mine second. She's going, no, 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 your hopes, dreams, and desires first, mine second. So to wrap up this series, I'm just going to send you out with a few questions. And just one of the first one is, what's in your boxes? Like you should know that. Maybe you even need to write it down. But what's in my box? Even if you're somebody who's single, you're not yet married, you should know what's in there, because at some point you're gonna hand that box to someone because you've got it. You just We all do. So what's in your box? The second question is, if you're married, what in your hopes, dreams, and desires box has migrated into your expectations that you're putting onto your spouse? In other words, what have you handed off to your spouse to carry? And what to you feels like hopes, dreams, and desires from their perspective as expectations? Somebody living with the extra weight and the pressure that they were not designed to carry or live with. And as a side note, this doesn't always get handed off to a spouse. Often, many times, this gets handed off to our children as well. We don't realize it. So I guess the question is there anyone in our life who, even though we may not have intended it to, but we put a load on them that they weren't designed to carry and actually shouldn't carry because they become expectations? And before I close, I want to say something that may sound completely contradictory to the passage that I just repeated, because we've talked about in this series and everything that I've said over the past few weeks. We are called to be devoted to one another in marriage, but devoted does not equal doormat. Which means this, that husbands, you're actually not responsible for your wife's happiness. And wives, you're not responsible for your husband's happiness. Or wives, your husband is not responsible for your happiness. Husbands, your wife is not responsible for your happiness. And again, that may sound counter to everything I've said, but what you and I are responsible for is to unconditionally and sacrificially love one another. That is one of the biggest takeaways from the past 5 weeks of the series. To forgive one another, to believe the best in your spouse when they fall short of your expectation, to serve one another, to mutually submit to one another, to learn your spouse's love language, and then to learn to love them by their language, and to learn to keep your expectations box empty and keep everything in your desires box. But in the end, this is important. With all those applications, in the end, what they do with that is on them, not you. I'm going to try to make this as clear as I can, and I'm going to do it. And I'm a little scared to do it because I'm ADHD and I'm switching illustrations here and everything. But in my real life at home, I told you I'm the yard guy. Uh, this bucket, and I have some others that are just like it. It plays an important role in my life, and that is I'm also a tree guy, so we've had several trees planted, and when a tree is young, most of us know it takes some time for it to get established. In Kansas, being Kansas, like right now, it's been super dry. You got to keep those things watered, and like a sprinkler system is not going to be enough. And but in this bucket, right here at the base, there's about an 8-inch hole that I drilled in the bottom of it. And so that way, what I do is I put it right against the base of the tree, which I have a picture of, and I put it right against the base of the tree. I fill it completely to the top, and then what happens is it slowly trickles out and absorbs into the dirt and into the roots. Otherwise, it would just run off. And because it's a 5-gallon bucket, I could do two, I can do three based on the size of the tree. So it means I can control the pace of the water, how much water it gets, all those things. So this last week, because I was watering, it was what came to mind that all of us, I'm going to rename this our emotional bucket. That every one of us, we have an emotional bucket. And it's tied to feelings and emotions. And the reality for all of us is because of what we've experienced in our past or in our life at some point, we we've got a hole in our emotional bucket. And so yeah, things pour into it, but as things get poured into it, we've got holes. Something comes out. And I would argue that we don't just have one hole, we've got multiple holes. And it may be tied to things that we experience in our family where uh, maybe we've got daddy wounds, mommy wounds. Dad was a workaholic. Dad wasn't there. Dad had a short temper. Mom was dealing with depression or anxiety or OCD, or both of them were. Maybe there were addiction issues. Maybe there's abandonment issues, either because, again, they just weren't there emotionally and physically present, or maybe for some, depending on your background, there's physical trauma, there's physical abuse, there is verbal abuse, and those things. I give up, but they create big holes, and we don't know that we have them necessarily. But we bring those into the relationship, and we can be married to somebody and in a relationship, and they're pouring and they're pouring and they're pouring into us and they're pouring into us. And we look at them and go, why am I unhappy? Why am I unhappy? Well, it's because of you, but it doesn't matter how much they pour in. It's never going to fill up. And at some point, we have to acknowledge that, it's of me that I brought into this relationship. We talked about the beads. We used Mr. and Mrs. Mugg. This is just another example that when we come into this relationship, our heart is in a certain condition because of what we experienced in our life. And eventually, what happens is, no matter who's pouring into us, if it's going out faster than it's going in, we end up into a place that's very dark and unhealthy. The bottom line is our emotional bucket will never stay full on its own. And in an ideal world, it'll be pouring in faster than what's coming out. Because if not, eventually we become empty. We have nothing to give. It becomes very discouraging and overwhelming. And it's a scary place to be. I've been there at least 3 times in my life. And the challenge is for all of us is to figure out what fills our emotional buckets and who we're expecting to fill our emotional buckets, as well as to do whatever we can to patch some of the holes, which is possible. Because if we're unwilling to face up to the reality of the holes in our emotional bucket and identify them and deal with them in an effective, healthy way, to patch them, to narrow them, to heal them, we will inevitably, especially in a marriage, we will inevitably set our spouses and our marriage up for failure because we will put on them a burden that they're just simply not capable of or called to carry. My happiness is not Shauna's responsibility. Her happiness is not my responsibility. My responsibility as her husband is to love her as Christ loved the church, sacrificially, unconditionally. Her responsibility is to love and respect me as her husband, to love me unconditionally and sacrificially. But what we do with that love shown to us by the other, how we react and how we receive and how we respond to that love from one another, that's on us individually. Now, I'm in none of your homes on a daily basis, so maybe for all this is like, this is not pertinent to you. I just know that we're all broken individuals trying to navigate a broken world together. And even if it was just one person that might need to hear this loud and clear, and I need to give this morning. So, what's in your boxes? What's in your hopes, dreams, and desires box? What's in your expectations box? If you're not sure, and if you're married, ask your spouse. Odds are they can tell you. But here's the deal: if you do that, if you ask your spouse and they give you an answer you don't like, don't get defensive because their perception is your reality. It doesn't matter what you intend. That's irrelevant. Their perception becomes your reality. And it may be that you either need to own a blind spot or a few blind spots. And it could even come out of the conversation where this hope, dream, and desire is at a good, healthy level. But it could also be that, well, there's a healthy level, but then there's a level that as you talk through, you just know I can't meet that because you realize as you talk it through and you do a little bit digging, especially if you involve a really good counselor, they begin to identify some of the holes that maybe you didn't realize they were there or that they're as big as they are. So where are the holes in your emotional bucket? And how big are they? And if you either suspect or know that you've got so many holes that deep down, it doesn't matter how perfectly or daily or consistently your husband or wife were to show you love in your love language, it's never really going to be enough. And that takes a lot of courage and honesty to acknowledge. So the question is, what are you willing to do about it? Are you willing to humble yourself and acknowledge it with your mate? Maybe even ask them for your forgiveness. I've done this with my wife. When I realized I was putting a burden on her that it was tied to my junk, say, I am sorry that I put this on you. Just acknowledge it, to seek their forgiveness for ways that maybe you blame them for your unhappiness that had less to do with their behavior and more to what you brought into the relationship. Would you have the courage to make a doctor's appointment, make an appointment with a recommended therapist to do the work? Because one of the other things that I've learned is that besides just life experience for some of us, we battle chemical imbalances. We battle mental illness challenges. It's a real thing. And it's having the courage to do whatever it takes to dig into these things. And speaking from personal experience, when you do that work and you work together, you can begin to close and patch those holes. And with God's help, experience healing and restoration. And speaking from almost 40 years of experience, I'm telling you, it's worth it. The way to grow and mature as believers is for those of us who claim to be followers of Christ. This is the way to do it. This is the way to grow old together, in love with each other, as you champion and lift up one another in such a way that it transcends feelings. Because showing love in spite of whether we feel love, that's the kind of thing that kindles and rekindles and keeps the in love feelings alive. Let me pray for us. Father, I just lift up all of us because this whole group and those who are listening later online, because we're all at different places and stages as far as relationships. I know for some of us, Father, hearing this content, it feels like needed this decades ago or a few years ago. And for others, so glad that they're hearing it now. And but wherever this lands, Father, I pray that you would cause it to land in a place that produces fruit in our life, whether it's with us, whether it's a younger individual that we're trying to mentor and guide and counsel, or a younger couple, whatever it is, Father. I pray for every one of us who are married that, Father, that you would give us the courage to look in the mirror and give us the eyes to see clearly where it is that maybe we're burdening our spouse in ways that we shouldn't. I pray, Father, that you would also give us the heart of Jesus to be selfless enough to truly make the pursuit of fulfilling the hopes, dreams, and desires of the person that we say we love more than anyone on this planet truly a mission in our life, and that we would find it a joy, not because we feel like it's an expectation, but just because we love them and we know they love us. So, Father, I pray that you would kindle this kind of love in every marriage relationship. And I pray, Father, that you would use us, especially as the next generation is watching us and paying attention to us. That, Father, that we would paint the picture, such a beautiful picture, that they say, when I grow up, that's what I want. And that you would partner up them with someone who wants the same. Father, I pray all this in the